Welcome to We Are History, where we trade marble pillars for sun-baked olive groves and step into the dust-streaked lanes of ancient Greece. Picture dawn breaking over whitewashed homes as oil lamps gutter out, families rubbing sleep from their eyes beneath stone-cold courtyards. The scent of fresh bread mingles with bleeding goats, led to market stalls in the bustling agora, where philosophers like Socrates debate ethics, while farmers lug baskets of figs under the relentless heat. Think of Athenian citizens gathering under the olive trees, voices rising in the first experiments of democracy, even as the clank of plowshares and the grind of millstones remind them that survival is never guaranteed. Here, ideas that shaped Western thought met the toil of everyday life, because to know Greece, you must feel the sun on your back and the rough stones underfoot. Ancient Greece, a civilization that flourished from the 8th century BC to the end of antiquity, is often celebrated for its profound contributions to modern civilization, particularly in the realms of philosophy and democracy. This remarkable society laid the groundwork for Western thought, with philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle exploring fundamental questions about existence, ethics, and governance. Their ideas continue to resonate today, shaping our understanding of morality, politics, and the nature of knowledge. Moreover, the concept of democracy, which emerged in Athens, introduced the revolutionary idea that citizens could participate in their governance, a radical departure from the autocratic rule that characterized much of the ancient world. However, while these intellectual and political advancements are often highlighted, it is essential to recognize the complexities of daily life in ancient Greece, where the average citizen faced numerous struggles. The realities of existence for many were marked by hard labor, economic instability, and social hierarchies that dictated one's place in society. Farmers toiled under the harsh sun, artisans worked tirelessly to create goods, and many citizens grappled with the constant threat of war and political upheaval. The lives of women and slaves, often marginalized in historical narratives, reveal additional layers of complexity as they navigated a society that largely excluded them from the public sphere. Engaging with these realities allows us to appreciate the rich tapestry of ancient Greek life, where the ideals of philosophy and democracy coexisted with the everyday challenges faced by its people. By delving into the intricacies of this ancient civilization, we can better understand not only its monumental achievements, but also the human experiences that shaped its legacy. In ancient Greece, the typical morning routine of a citizen was a reflection of the era's living conditions, societal norms, and the physical challenges that defined daily life. As dawn broke over the landscape, the first light would filter through the small windows of modest homes, often constructed from sun-dried mud bricks or stone. These dwellings were typically simple, with limited space and minimal furnishings. A typical house might consist of a central courtyard surrounded by rooms that served various purposes, such as sleeping, cooking, and storage. The lack of modern amenities meant that life was far from comfortable. There was no running water, electricity, or central heating. Instead, families relied on communal wells for water and used oil lamps for light, creating a stark contrast to the conveniences we often take for granted today. As the sun began to rise, the sounds of the bustling city would gradually fill the air. For many citizens, the day started early, as the demands of agriculture and trade dictated a strict schedule. Farmers would rise before dawn to tend to their fields, while artisans prepared for a long day of labor in their workshops. The physical hardships faced by these individuals were significant. The work was often grueling and required long hours of labor under the hot sun. For farmers, the routine involved plowing fields, planting seeds, and caring for livestock, all of which required immense physical strength and endurance. The toil was relentless, and the success of their crops was never guaranteed, leading to a constant struggle for sustenance. In the urban centers, the morning routine was equally demanding. Artisans and merchants would gather in the agora, the central marketplace, to sell their goods and services. The communal nature of life in ancient Greece meant that social interactions were an integral part of the daily routine. Neighbors would greet one another, share news, and discuss the affairs of the city. However, this communal life also came with its own set of challenges. The competition for customers was fierce, and artisans often faced the pressure of meeting the demands of their patrons while ensuring their own livelihoods. The lack of modern conveniences meant that many tasks were labor-intensive. For instance, weaving cloth or preparing food required significant time and effort, often involving the entire family in the process. Women, in particular, faced unique challenges in their morning routines. While men typically engaged in public life, women were often confined to the domestic sphere, responsible for managing the household. Their mornings would begin with chores, such as grinding grain, fetching water, and preparing meals for the family. The physical demands of these tasks were considerable, and the lack of modern appliances meant that every chore was labor-intensive. Women would often work alongside their daughters, teaching them the skills necessary for managing a household, while also navigating the societal expectations placed upon them. As the day progressed, the heat of the sun would intensify, adding to the physical strain experienced by citizens. The midday sun made outdoor work particularly challenging, and many would take a break during the hottest hours to rest and seek shade. This pause in activity was not merely a luxury, it was a necessity for survival in a climate that could be unforgiving. The communal aspect of life continued during these breaks, as neighbors would gather to share food and stories, reinforcing social bonds while also providing a momentary respite from the rigors of daily life. As the afternoon approached, the routines would shift once again. Farmers would return to their fields, while artisans would resume their work in the workshops. The cycle of labor was relentless, and the physical toll it took on individuals was evident. Many citizens faced the reality of injuries and exhaustion, as the demands of their routines left little room for rest or recovery. The lack of medical knowledge and resources meant that even minor injuries could lead to significant complications, further complicating the already challenging lives of these individuals. In the evenings, families would gather to share a meal, often consisting of simple fare such as bread, olives, and vegetables. The communal nature of dining was an essential aspect of life in ancient Greece, as it provided an opportunity for families to bond and reflect on the day's events. However, the simplicity of their meals also highlighted the struggles faced by many citizens, as food scarcity was a constant concern. The reliance on seasonal crops and the unpredictability of harvests meant that families often had to make do with what little they had, reinforcing the importance of community support in times of need. As night fell, the routines of ancient Greek citizens would wind down. The absence of modern lighting meant that evenings were often spent in darkness, with families gathering around oil lamps to share stories or engage in quiet activities. The physical exhaustion from the day's labor would take its toll, and many would retire early to prepare for the demands of the next day. The cyclical nature of their routines underscored the resilience of these individuals who faced the challenges of daily life with determination and strength. In conclusion, the typical morning routine of an ancient Greek citizen was a testament to the complexities of life in this historical context. The living conditions, characterized by simple housing and a lack of modern amenities, shaped the daily experiences of individuals. The challenges of daily chores, coupled with the communal nature of life, created a unique social dynamic that defined ancient Greek society. Furthermore, the physical hardships faced by citizens in their routines highlighted the resilience and determination required to navigate the demands of their environment. By understanding these realities, we gain a deeper appreciation for the lives of those who lived in ancient Greece, recognizing both their struggles and their contributions to the foundations of modern civilization. In ancient Greece, breakfast was a simple and often unappetizing affair, reflecting the limited food options available to the average citizen. Unlike the elaborate breakfast we might expect today, the morning meal for most Greeks was minimal, consisting of basic staples that provided just enough sustenance to start the day. The typical breakfast might include a piece of bread, often stale or made from coarse grains, accompanied by a small amount of olive oil, or perhaps a few olives. In some cases, a bowl of porridge made from barley or wheat was consumed, sometimes sweetened with honey if available. However, such luxuries were not common, and many citizens relied on whatever was accessible, which often meant a rather bland and monotonous diet. The lack of variety in breakfast foods was indicative of the broader dietary constraints faced by ancient Greeks. Fresh fruits and vegetables were seasonal and not always readily available, particularly in the early morning hours. Dairy products were also limited, with cheese being one of the few options, but it was not a staple for everyone. Fish and meat were typically reserved for special occasions or for those who could afford them, making their presence in the morning meal quite rare. As a result, the breakfast table was often sparse, lacking the colorful array of foods that characterize modern breakfasts. This stark contrast highlights the significant differences in dietary expectations between ancient and contemporary societies, where breakfast has evolved into a meal celebrated for its variety and nutritional value. The social dynamics surrounding breakfast in ancient Greece were also noteworthy, particularly regarding the roles of men and women. In many households, the responsibility for preparing meals fell primarily on women, who were expected to manage the domestic sphere. This often meant that women would rise early to prepare breakfast for their families, a task that was both labor-intensive and time-consuming. However, the nature of the meal itself often reflected the limited agency women had in society. While men might gather in public spaces to discuss politics or philosophy over a more substantial meal, women typically remained confined to the home, their contributions to the household largely unrecognized. The act of preparing breakfast, therefore, became a symbol of their domestic role, reinforcing the societal norms that dictated their place within the family and the broader community. Moreover, the communal aspect of eating breakfast was less pronounced than it might be today. While families would often share meals, the morning routine was typically hurried, with individuals quickly consuming their food before heading off to work or school. This lack of emphasis on the social dynamics of breakfast further underscored the differences between ancient and modern practices. In contemporary society, breakfast is often seen as an opportunity for families to gather and connect, a time to enjoy a variety of foods and engage in conversation. In contrast, the ancient Greek breakfast was more functional, serving primarily as a means to fuel the body for the day's labor rather than a moment of social bonding. The contrast between ancient meals and modern dietary expectations is stark. Today, breakfast options are vast and varied, ranging from elaborate spreads featuring eggs, bacon, and pancakes, to healthier choices like smoothies and granola bowls. The emphasis on nutrition and the availability of diverse ingredients have transformed breakfast into a meal that caters to a wide range of tastes and dietary needs. In ancient Greece, however, the focus was primarily on sustenance rather than enjoyment. The limited food options available meant that breakfast was often a monotonous affair, lacking the flavors and textures that characterize modern meals. Additionally, the cultural significance of breakfast has evolved over time. In ancient Greece, Meals were often tied to social status and wealth, with the affluent enjoying a greater variety of foods and more elaborate dining experiences. For the average citizen, however, breakfast was a reflection of their economic circumstances, with many families struggling to secure enough food to meet their basic needs. This disparity in access to food highlights the broader social dynamics at play in ancient Greek society, where class distinctions influenced not only what individuals ate, but also how they experienced communal meals. Furthermore, the nutritional content of ancient breakfasts was often inadequate by modern standards. While contemporary diets emphasize the importance of balanced meals that include proteins, carbohydrates, and healthy fats, ancient Greek breakfasts were typically low in protein and lacked the variety necessary for optimal health. The reliance on bread and porridge meant that many citizens were not receiving the essential nutrients needed to sustain their energy levels throughout the day. This nutritional deficiency could have significant implications for overall health, particularly for those engaged in physically demanding labor. In conclusion, the typical breakfast consumed by ancient Greeks was a reflection of the limited food options available, the social dynamics of eating, and the stark contrast between ancient meals and modern dietary expectations. The minimal and often unappetizing nature of breakfast highlights the challenges faced by citizens in securing adequate nutrition, while the roles of men and women in meal preparation underscore the societal norms that shape their lives. As we consider the evolution of breakfast from ancient times to the present, it becomes clear that food is not merely a source of sustenance, but also a reflection of cultural values, social structures, and individual experiences. Understanding the realities of ancient Greek breakfasts allows us to appreciate the complexities of their daily lives and the ways in which food continues to play a vital role in shaping our identities and communities today. In ancient Greece, hygiene practices and beliefs were deeply intertwined with the cultural values of the society, reflecting a unique understanding of cleanliness, health, and social interaction. Bathing was not merely a personal hygiene routine, but a communal activity that fostered social bonds and reinforced societal norms. Public baths, known as balaneia, were common in cities and served as important social hubs where individuals gathered to cleanse themselves and engage in conversation. These baths were often elaborate structures, featuring a series of rooms with varying temperatures, including hot, warm, and cold baths, allowing bathers to choose their preferred experience. The communal nature of bathing emphasized the Greeks' belief in the importance of social interaction, as individuals would often spend hours in these spaces discussing politics, philosophy, and daily life while enjoying the cleansing rituals. Olive oil played a significant role in the hygiene practices of ancient Greeks, serving not only as a moisturizer, but also as a cleansing agent. After bathing, individuals would often apply olive oil to their skin, which was believed to provide nourishment and protection. This practice was not merely about cleanliness, it was also a way to enhance one's appearance and maintain a healthy complexion. The use of olive oil extended beyond personal hygiene. It was the symbol of wealth and status, as high-quality oil was a prized commodity in ancient Greece. The ritual of anointing oneself with olive oil was often accompanied by the application of perfumes, further emphasizing the cultural importance placed on scent and personal grooming. However, the communal bathing practices also highlighted the lack of privacy that characterized daily life in ancient Greece. Public baths were often crowded, and the absence of individual bathing spaces meant that personal hygiene routines were conducted in full view of others. This lack of privacy extended to other aspects of life as well, as homes were typically small and shared among family members. The concept of personal space was different from modern understandings, and individuals were accustomed to being in close proximity to one another, both in public and private settings. This communal approach to hygiene fostered a sense of community, but also meant that personal habits and body odors were more noticeable and at times less scrutinized than they might be today. The cultural attitudes towards cleanliness and body odor in ancient Greece were complex and varied. While the Greeks valued cleanliness and took pride in their grooming habits, their understanding of body odor was not entirely aligned with modern sensibilities. Bathing was seen as essential for health and well-being, but the frequency of baths varied depending on social status, access to facilities, and personal beliefs. Wealthier citizens had greater access to baths and could afford to bathe more frequently, while poorer individuals might rely on less regular washing. As a result, body odor was a more common aspect of daily life, and the Greeks had a different perspective on its implications. In ancient Greek culture, the presence of body odor was often viewed through a lens of practicality rather than stigma. While cleanliness was valued, the Greeks recognized that physical labor and the demands of daily life could lead to natural odors. Athletes, for example, were celebrated for their physical prowess, and their sweat was often seen as a sign of hard work and dedication rather than something to be ashamed of. This cultural attitude towards body odor was reflected in their literature and art, where depictions of athletes and laborers often highlighted the physicality of the human form, including the natural scents associated with it. Moreover, the Greeks had various methods for managing body odor, even if they did not have access to modern hygiene products. In addition to olive oil and perfumes, they utilized natural substances such as herbs and flowers to mask odors. Fragrant plants like thyme, rosemary, and lavender were commonly used in baths and personal grooming routines, providing a pleasant scent that helped to counteract any unpleasant smells. These practices demonstrated an understanding of the importance of scent in social interactions, as individuals sought to present themselves favorably in communal settings. The lack of modern hygiene products also shaped the hygiene practices of ancient Greeks. Without access to commercial soaps, deodorants, or other personal care items, individuals relied on natural resources and traditional methods to maintain cleanliness. The use of clay, ashes, and other abrasive materials for scrubbing the skin was common, as these substances helped to remove dirt and impurities. While these methods were effective to some extent, they did not provide the same level of cleanliness or comfort that modern products offer. The absence of disposable items, such as toilet paper or sanitary products, also meant that hygiene practices were more labor-intensive and required greater effort to maintain. Despite these challenges, the Greeks placed a high value on cleanliness as a reflection of one's character and social standing. Cleanliness was associated with discipline, self-control, and a sense of order, qualities that were highly regarded in Greek society. Philosophers like Socrates and Plato emphasized the importance of physical health and hygiene as integral to a well-rounded life, linking personal cleanliness to moral virtue. This cultural belief in the connection between hygiene and character influenced the way individuals approached their daily routines as they sought to embody the ideals of their society. In conclusion, hygiene practices and beliefs in ancient Greece were characterized by communal bathing, the use of olive oil, and a unique understanding of cleanliness and body odor. The communal nature of bathing fostered social connections and reinforced societal norms, while the reliance on olive oil highlighted the importance of personal grooming. The lack of privacy and modern hygiene products shaped daily routines, creating a different relationship with cleanliness than we experience today. Cultural attitudes towards body odor were pragmatic, reflecting a society that valued hard work and physicality over modern notions of personal hygiene. By examining these practices and beliefs, we gain insight into the complexities of daily life in ancient Greece. and the ways in which hygiene was intertwined with social identity and cultural values. In ancient Greece, clothing and footwear were not merely functional items, but also significant indicators of social status, cultural identity, and personal expression. The garments worn by ancient Greeks were primarily made from natural fibers, such as wool, linen, and cotton, which were readily available and suited to the Mediterranean climate. The most common types of garments included the chiton, himation, and peplos, each serving different purposes and reflecting various aspects of daily life. The chiton was a fundamental garment worn by both men and women, consisting of a simple tunic made from a rectangular piece of fabric. For men, the chiton was typically knee-length and belted at the waist, allowing for ease of movement. Women's chitons were often longer, reaching down to the ankles, and could be styled in various ways, including draping and folding to create different looks. While the chiton was versatile and comfortable, it had practical limitations. The loose-fitting design, while allowing for airflow in the warm climate, could also be cumbersome during physical activities. The fabric could easily become tangled or caught, making it less than ideal for labor-intensive tasks. Additionally, the simplicity of the chiton meant that it offered little protection against the elements, such as rain or cold winds, which could be a concern during certain seasons. The himation was another essential garment, typically worn over the chiton. This rectangular piece of cloth was draped around the body, providing additional warmth and protection. The himation could be styled in various ways, allowing for personal expression and creativity. However, its practicality was somewhat limited, as it could slip or shift during movement, requiring constant adjustment. Despite these limitations, the himation was a popular choice for both men and women, often associated with philosophical and intellectual pursuits, as it was commonly worn by scholars and orators. The peplos, primarily worn by women, was a more structured garment that involved folding and fastening the fabric at the shoulders, creating a more fitted silhouette. While the peplos offered a more tailored appearance, it also had its drawbacks. The fastening mechanism could be cumbersome, and the garment required careful handling to maintain its shape. Additionally, the peplos was typically made from heavier materials, which could be uncomfortable in the heat of summer. Despite these practical limitations, the peplos was often adorned with decorative elements, reflecting the wearer's status and taste. One notable aspect of ancient Greek clothing was the absence of undergarments. Unlike modern clothing practices, which often include a variety of undergarments for comfort and support, ancient Greeks typically wore their garments directly against their skin. This lack of undergarments had significant implications for comfort and practicality. While the loose-fitting nature of the chiton and peplos allowed for freedom of movement, the absence of supportive undergarments meant that women, in particular, had to navigate the challenges of maintaining modesty and comfort without the benefits of additional layers. The reliance on fabric alone for coverage could lead to discomfort, especially during physical activities or in windy conditions. The absence of undergarments also influenced the way clothing was designed and worn. For women, the chiton and peplos were often styled to provide coverage while allowing for ease of movement. The use of belts and sashes helped to secure the garments in place, but the lack of structured undergarments meant that adjustments were often necessary throughout the day. This reliance on fabric alone for support and coverage could lead to a sense of vulnerability, particularly in public settings where modesty was highly valued. Footwear in ancient Greece was equally varied and reflected both practicality and social status. The most common type of footwear was the sandal, typically made from leather or woven materials. Sandals were designed to be lightweight and breathable, making them suitable for the warm climate. However, their open design offered little protection against rough terrain or inclement weather. For this reason, sandals were often worn for everyday activities, while more robust footwear, such as boots, was reserved for specific occasions or for those engaged in labor-intensive work. The style and quality of sandals varied significantly based on social status. Wealthier individuals could afford more elaborate sandals, often adorned with decorative elements such as intricate designs or embellishments. These sandals not only served a practical purpose, but also acted as a status symbol, reflecting the wearer's wealth and social standing. In contrast, poorer citizens often wore simpler, more utilitarian sandals that prioritized function over style. This disparity in footwear choices highlighted the broader social dynamics of ancient Greek society, where clothing and accessories were powerful indicators of one's place within the social hierarchy. In addition to sandals, some Greeks wore closed shoes, particularly during colder months or for specific activities. These shoes were typically made from leather and provided more coverage and protection than sandals. However, they were less common than sandals, as the warm Mediterranean climate made open footwear more practical for daily wear. The choice of footwear was often influenced by the individual's occupation, with laborers and farmers opting for sturdier shoes to withstand the rigors of their work. The cultural attitudes towards clothing and footwear in ancient Greece were deeply rooted in the values of the society. Cleanliness and appearance were considered essential aspects of personal identity, and individuals took pride in their clothing choices. The act of dressing was often seen as a reflection of one's character and social standing, with well-dressed individuals garnering respect and admiration. Philosophers and writers of the time often commented on the importance of appearance, linking it to virtues such as discipline and self-control. Moreover, clothing was often associated with specific roles and identities within society. For example, the garments worn by athletes during competitions were designed to highlight the physical form and celebrate the ideals of strength and beauty. Similarly, the attire of philosophers and scholars, often characterized by the hymesion, conveyed a sense of intellectualism and wisdom. This connection between clothing and identity underscored the significance of garments in shaping social interactions and perceptions. In conclusion, the clothing and footwear worn by ancient Greeks were characterized by a variety of garments, each with its practical limitations and cultural significance. The chiton, hymegion, and peplos served as essential components of daily attire, reflecting the values and norms of the society. The absence of undergarments had implications for comfort and modesty, while the choices in footwear highlighted social status and individual identity. Clothing was not merely a means of protection against the elements, it was a powerful expression of character, social standing, and cultural identity. By examining the clothing practices of ancient Greece, we gain insight into the complexities of their society and the ways in which garments shaped their daily lives and interactions. In ancient Greece, military service was not only a duty, but also a rite of passage for male citizens, deeply embedded in the fabric of society. The expectations surrounding military service were significant, shaping the identities of young men and influencing their roles within the community. From a young age, boys were groomed for the responsibilities of citizenship, which included the expectation of military service. This preparation began early, often in childhood, as young boys were taught the values of discipline, bravery, and loyalty, qualities deemed essential for a soldier. Training for military service was rigorous and demanding, reflecting the high stakes of warfare in ancient Greece. Boys typically entered a form of military education known as the agog in Sparta, which was a state-sponsored program designed to instill discipline and physical prowess. This training was not limited to physical conditioning. It also encompassed lessons in strategy, tactics, and the importance of camaraderie among soldiers. The Agage emphasized endurance, strength, and combat skills, preparing young men for the harsh realities of battle. In other city-states, such as Athens, military training was also important, though it was often less formalized than in Sparta. Young men participated in various forms of training, including participation in local militias and learning the use of weapons, which were crucial for defending their city-state. The societal pressures faced by young men during this period were immense. The expectation to serve in the military was not merely a personal choice, it was a societal obligation that defined one's status as a citizen. Young men were acutely aware that their worthiness as citizens was often measured by their willingness and ability to fight for their city-state. This pressure to conform to societal expectations could lead to intense competition among peers, as young men sought to prove their valor and strength. The fear of being perceived as cowardly or weak was a powerful motivator, driving many to push their limits during training and in battle. The communal nature of military service fostered a sense of brotherhood among soldiers, but it also created an environment where individual failures could lead to public shame and ostracism. Military service played a crucial role in shaping identity and citizenship in ancient Greece. For many young men, serving as a soldier was a defining moment in their lives, marking their transition from boyhood to adulthood. The experience of training and fighting alongside fellow citizens forged strong bonds and a sense of belonging within the community. Successful military service was often celebrated, and those who distinguished themselves in battle could gain significant honor and prestige. Victorious soldiers were often lauded in public ceremonies, and their achievements were immortalized in poetry and art, reinforcing the idea that military prowess was a key component of a man's identity. Moreover, military service was intricately linked to the concept of citizenship in ancient Greece. Citizenship was not merely a legal status, it was a social contract that entailed responsibilities, including the defense of the city-state. Men who served in the military were afforded certain rights and privileges, such as the ability to participate in political life and own property. Conversely, those who failed to fulfill their military obligations risked losing their citizenship rights, which could lead to social marginalization. This connection between military service and citizenship underscored the importance of loyalty to one's city-state and the collective responsibility of its citizens to protect their homeland. The constant threat of war loomed large over daily life in ancient Greece, shaping the experiences of citizens and influencing their routines. City-states were often engaged in conflicts with one another, whether through territorial disputes, competition for resources, or political rivalries. The unpredictability of warfare meant that military readiness was a constant concern for citizens. Young men were aware that their training and preparedness could be called upon at any moment, leading to a heightened sense of urgency in their military education. This reality permeated daily life, as families and communities were often preoccupied with the implications of potential conflict. The impact of war on daily life extended beyond the battlefield. The threat of invasion or attack influenced agricultural practices, trade, and social interactions. Farmers had to balance their agricultural responsibilities with the need to remain vigilant and prepared for military service. In times of heightened tension, communities would often come together to fortify their defenses, reinforcing the idea that collective security was paramount. The constant awareness of potential conflict fostered a culture of resilience and adaptability, as citizens learned to navigate the challenges posed by the ever-present threat of war. Additionally, the experience of war had profound psychological effects on soldiers and their families. The realities of battle were brutal, and the loss of comrades could lead to deep emotional scars. Soldiers returning from campaigns often faced the challenge of reintegrating into civilian life. grappling with the memories of violence and the loss. The societal expectation to maintain a stoic demeanor in the face of such trauma could lead to feelings of isolation and alienation. Families, too, were affected by the constant threat of war, as they lived with the anxiety of losing loved ones to battle. The emotional toll of military service extended beyond the individual soldier, impacting entire communities and shaping the collective consciousness of society. In conclusion, the expectations of military service for male citizens in ancient Greece were multifaceted, encompassing rigorous training, societal pressures, and the profound impact of war on daily life. Young men were groomed for military service from an early age, with training designed to instill discipline and camaraderie. The societal obligation to serve in the military shaped identity and citizenship, as successful service was celebrated and failure could lead to social marginalization. The constant threat of war influenced daily routines and community dynamics, fostering a culture of resilience and adaptability. By understanding these expectations and their implications, we gain insight into the complexities of ancient Greek society and the ways in which military service was woven into the very fabric of citizenship and identity. In ancient Greece, the rights and responsibilities of women were markedly limited, shaped by societal norms and expectations that confined them primarily to the domestic sphere. Women were generally expected to fulfill roles centered around the home, family, and community, with their primary responsibilities revolving around domestic duties. These duties included managing the household, raising children, and ensuring the smooth operation of family life. The domestic sphere was considered the appropriate domain for women, and their contributions were often undervalued in the broader context of society. The expectations placed on women were deeply rooted in the cultural beliefs of the time, which emphasized the importance of family and lineage. Women were responsible for weaving, cooking, and other household tasks, which were essential for the family's well-being. The management of the household was a significant responsibility, as it involved not only the care of children, but also the oversight of servants and slaves, if the family could afford them. Women were expected to maintain a clean and orderly home, reflecting the family's status and reputation within the community. This focus on domestic duties left little room for personal ambition or public engagement, as women were often discouraged from pursuing educational careers outside the home. The lack of political rights for women in ancient Greece was a defining characteristic of their societal status. In most city-states, women were excluded from participating in political life, which was reserved for male citizens. They could not vote, hold public office, or engage in political discussions in the agora, the central public space where civic matters were debated. This exclusion from political rights meant that women had little influence over the laws and policies that governed their lives. Their voices were largely absent from the political discourse, and their opinions were often disregarded in matters of public concern. The absence of political rights was compounded by the societal expectation that women should remain in the background, focusing on their roles as wives and mothers. This limited public presence meant that women had few opportunities to engage with the broader community or advocate for their interests. While some women may have participated in religious festivals or social gatherings, their involvement was typically restricted to the domestic sphere, reinforcing the notion that their primary responsibilities lay within the home. The lack of agency in political matters further entrenched the perception of women as subordinate to men, perpetuating a cycle of inequality that persisted throughout ancient Greek society. However, the experiences of women varied significantly across different city-states, with notable contrasts between places like Athens and Sparta. In Athens, women were largely confined to the domestic sphere, with their lives dictated by strict social norms. Athenian women were expected to marry young, often around the age of 14, and their primary role was to bear and raise children. They had limited freedom of movement and were generally not allowed to leave the house unaccompanied. This confinement was reflective of the broader Athenian belief in the importance of female modesty and virtue, which dictated that women should remain out of the public eye. In contrast, Spartan women enjoyed a relatively higher status and greater freedoms compared to their Athenian counterparts. Spartan society placed a strong emphasis on physical fitness and military prowess, and women were encouraged to engage in physical training to ensure they could bear strong children. This focus on health and strength allowed Spartan women to participate more actively in public life. They could own property, manage their estates, and even engage in business transactions, which was uncommon in other city-states. The Spartan system recognized the importance of women in producing and raising future warriors, leading to a more empowered role within the community. Despite these differences, it is essential to note that even in Sparta, women were still subject to societal expectations that prioritized their roles as mothers and wives. While they had more freedoms, their primary responsibility remained the production of healthy offspring to contribute to the Spartan military. The societal structure in Sparta was designed to support the needs of the state, and women's roles were ultimately aligned with this goal. Thus, while Spartan women experienced greater autonomy, their rights were still limited by the overarching demands of a militaristic society. The contrast between the experiences of women in Athens and Sparta highlights the complexities of gender roles in ancient Greece. In Athens, women were largely marginalized, their lives confined to the domestic sphere, while in Sparta, they enjoyed a degree of freedom that allowed them to participate more actively in society. However, both city-states shared a common thread of limiting women's rights and responsibilities, reinforcing the notion that their primary value lay in their roles as wives and mothers. Moreover, the limited rights of women in ancient Greece extended beyond political and social spheres to encompass legal rights as well. Women were generally considered legal minors, unable to own property independently or enter into contracts without the consent of a male guardian. This legal framework further entrenched their subordinate status, as women relied on their fathers or husbands to manage their affairs. In many cases, women had little control over their own lives, with decisions regarding marriage, property, and finances made by male relatives. This lack of autonomy not only restricted their personal freedoms, but also reinforced the perception of women as dependent on men for their well-being. The societal expectations placed on women also had implications for their education and intellectual development. In most city-states, formal education was primarily reserved for boys, who were trained in subjects such as philosophy, mathematics, and rhetoric. Women, on the other hand, were often denied access to education, limiting their opportunities for intellectual growth and personal development. While some women may have received informal education at home, the lack of structured learning meant that their knowledge and skills were often confined to domestic tasks. This educational disparity further perpetuated the cycle of inequality, as women were less equipped to engage in public life or advocate for their rights. Despite these limitations, some women in ancient Greece managed to carve out spaces for themselves within the constraints of their society. Notable figures, such as Sappho, a poet from the island of Lesbos, gained recognition for their artistic contributions, challenging the prevailing norms of their time. Sappho's poetry, which explored themes of love and desire, provided a glimpse into the inner lives of women and their experiences, offering a counter-narrative to the dominant male perspectives of the era. While such examples were rare, they demonstrated that women could assert their voices and creativity, even within a society that sought to silence them. In conclusion, the limited rights and responsibilities of women in ancient Greece were shaped by societal expectations that confined them primarily to the domestic sphere. Women were tasked with managing households and raising children, with little opportunity for political engagement or public presence. The experiences of women varied across city-states, with notable contrast between the restrictive environment of Athens and the relatively empowered status of women in Sparta. However, in both contexts, women faced significant limitations on their rights, legal status, and access to education. The societal norms of the time reinforced the perception of women as subordinate to men, perpetuating a cycle of inequality that would persist throughout history. By examining the roles and experiences of women in ancient Greece, we gain insight into the complexities of gender dynamics and the enduring impact of these historical realities on contemporary discussions of women's rights and societal roles. The concept of democracy in ancient Athens is often heralded as a groundbreaking development in political thought, laying the groundwork for modern democratic systems. However, while Athenian democracy was revolutionary in its emphasis on citizen participation and collective decision-making, it was also marked by significant limitations that excluded large segments of the population from political processes. Understanding the criteria for citizenship, the exclusion of women, slaves, and foreigners, and the paradoxical nature of Athenian democracy reveals the complexities of this historical system. In Athens, the criteria for citizenship were stringent and exclusive. To be considered a citizen, one had to be a male born to Athenian parents, which meant that citizenship was inherited rather than earned. This requirement effectively limited the pool of eligible citizens to a relatively small segment of the population. Estimates suggest that only about 10 to 20% of the total population of Athens were citizens, with the majority being women, slaves, and foreigners, groups that were systematically excluded from the political sphere. The emphasis on lineage and birthright as the basis for citizenship reflected the Athenian belief in the importance of maintaining a pure citizenry, which was seen as essential for the health and stability of the city-state. Once granted citizenship, Athenian men were expected to participate actively in the political life of the city. This participation included attending the assembly, where citizens gathered to discuss and vote on important matters such as laws, war, and public policy. The assembly was a central feature of Athenian democracy, embodying the principle of collective decision-making. Citizens could also serve on juries and hold public office, further reinforcing the idea that governance was a shared responsibility among the citizenry. However, the reality of participation was often complicated by social and economic factors. While the ideal of democracy emphasized equal participation, the practicalities of daily life meant that not all citizens could engage fully in the political process. Many citizens were occupied with work or other responsibilities, leading to a reliance on a smaller group of active participants in governance. The exclusion of women, slaves, and foreigners from political processes was one of the most significant limitations of Athenian democracy. Women, despite being integral to the household and family life, were barred from participating in public life. They could not vote, hold office, or attend the assembly, effectively relegating them to the domestic sphere. This exclusion was rooted in societal beliefs about gender roles, which dictated that women should focus on managing the home and raising children, rather than engaging in the political arena. The lack of political rights for women not only limited their agency, but also reinforced the notion that their contributions to society were secondary to those of men. Slavery was another critical aspect of Athenian society that highlighted the limitations of democracy. A significant portion of the population consisted of slaves who were considered property rather than citizens. Slaves performed essential labor in households, agriculture, and various trades, yet they had no rights or voice in the political process. The existence of slavery was a fundamental contradiction within the democratic framework, as the freedoms enjoyed by citizens were built upon the subjugation of others. The reliance on slave labor allowed Athenian citizens to engage in political life, but it also exposed the inherent inequalities within the system. Foreigners, or metics, also faced exclusion from political participation. While metics were often free individuals who lived and worked in Athens, they were not granted citizenship rights. They could contribute to the economy and society, but were denied a voice in governance. This exclusion reflected the Athenian belief in the superiority of native citizens and the desire to maintain a distinct Athenian identity. The metics' lack of political rights further emphasized the limitations of Athenian democracy, as it highlighted the barriers to participation based on birth and nationality. The paradox of Athenian democracy lies in its simultaneous revolutionary nature and its exclusivity. On one hand, the establishment of a system that allowed for citizen participation in governance was a radical departure from the autocratic rule that characterized many other city-states of the time. The principles of equality and collective decision-making were groundbreaking, inspiring future generations to envision more inclusive forms of governance. The Athenian model of democracy emphasized the importance of civic engagement and the belief that citizens had a stake in the decisions that affected their lives. However, this revolutionary spirit was undermined by the exclusionary practices that defined Athenian democracy. The very ideals of equality and participation were limited to a select group of individuals, leaving out women, slaves, and foreigners who constituted a significant portion of the population. This contradiction raises important questions about the nature of democracy itself. Can a system that excludes large segments of society truly be considered democratic? The Athenian experience illustrates the complexities of democratic governance, revealing that the ideals of democracy can be at odds with the realities of social hierarchies and inequalities. The limitations of Athenian democracy also had implications for the broader understanding of citizenship and political rights. The exclusion of women, slaves, and foreigners from political processes reinforced the notion that citizenship was tied to specific social and economic conditions. This understanding of citizenship as a privilege rather than a universal right has persisted throughout history, influencing contemporary discussions about who is entitled to participate in democratic processes. The Athenian model serves as a reminder that the struggle for political rights and representation is ongoing, as marginalized groups continue to advocate for their voices to be heard in democratic societies. In conclusion, the concept of democracy in ancient Athens was marked by both revolutionary ideals and significant limitations. The criteria for citizenship restricted political participation to a small segment of the population, while the exclusion of women, slaves, and foreigners highlighted the inherent inequalities within the system. The paradox of Athenian democracy lies in its simultaneous celebration of citizen engagement and its failure to include large portions of society in the political process. By examining these complexities, we gain a deeper understanding of the challenges and contradictions that have shaped the evolution of democratic governance, as well as the ongoing struggle for inclusivity and representation in contemporary political systems. The Athenian experience serves as both an inspiration and a cautionary tale, reminding us that the pursuit of democracy must be accompanied by a commitment to equity and justice for all members of society. Slavery was an integral part of Greek society, woven into the very fabric of daily life and the economy. In ancient Greece, slaves were not merely a marginalized group. They were essential to the functioning of households, agriculture, and various trades. The presence of slavery was so pervasive that it shaped social structures, economic practices, and cultural norms, influencing the lives of both free citizens and enslaved individuals. In terms of daily life, slaves performed a wide range of tasks that were crucial for the maintenance of households and the economy. In urban areas, slaves worked in various capacities, including domestic servants, artisans, and laborers. They were responsible for cooking, cleaning, and childcare, allowing free citizens, particularly women, to engage in social and political activities. In agricultural settings, slaves were the backbone of farming operations, tending to crops and livestock. Their labor was essential for producing the food that sustained the population, and their work enabled landowners to accumulate wealth and status. The economic reliance on slave labor extended to industries such as mining, where slaves were employed in harsh conditions to extract valuable resources like silver and gold. This integration of slavery into daily life and the economy created a system where the prosperity of free citizens was often built upon the exploitation of enslaved individuals. The treatment of slaves in ancient Greece varied widely depending on factors such as their roles, the disposition of their owners, and the specific city-state in which they lived. While some slaves experienced relatively humane treatment, others endured harsh conditions and brutal treatment. Domestic slaves, for instance, might have had better living conditions compared to those working in mines or on farms, where labor was grueling and dangerous. However, regardless of their specific circumstances, all slaves were denied basic rights and freedoms. They were considered property rather than individuals, and their lives were entirely controlled by their owners. Slaves could be bought, sold, or punished at the whim of their masters, and they had no legal recourse to protect themselves from mistreatment. The lack of rights for slaves was a defining characteristic of their status in Greek society. They could not own property, enter into contracts, or participate in legal proceedings. Their existence was marked by a complete absence of autonomy, and they were often subjected to dehumanizing treatment. The perception of slaves as mere tools for labor contributed to their marginalization, reinforcing the idea that they were inferior to free citizens. This perception was not only a social construct, but also a deeply ingrained belief that justified the institution of slavery within the cultural and philosophical frameworks of the time. Philosophical justifications for slavery were prevalent in ancient Greek thought, with prominent philosophers offering rationalizations for the practice. One of the most notable figures was Aristotle, who argued that slavery was a natural institution. In his work, Politics, Aristotle posited that some individuals were natural slaves, inherently suited for servitude due to their perceived lack of rationality and virtue. He believed that these individuals benefited from being governed by those who were more capable of reason and moral judgment. This view provided a philosophical foundation for the acceptance of slavery in Greek society, framing it as a necessary and beneficial arrangement for both slaves and their masters. Other philosophers, such as Plato, also addressed the issue of slavery, albeit with a more nuanced perspective. While Plato acknowledged the existence of slavery, he emphasized the importance of justice and the moral obligations of individuals toward one another. He argued that a just society should strive to treat all individuals with dignity, regardless of their status. However, even Plato did not advocate for the abolition of slavery. Instead, he accepted it as a reality of his time, suggesting that the ideal state would ensure that slaves were treated fairly and humanely. The philosophical justifications for slavery were not limited to individual thinkers. They were also reflected in the broader cultural attitudes of the time. The Greeks often viewed themselves as a superior civilization, and this sense of superiority extended to their treatment of non-Greeks and enslaved individuals. The concept of barbarism was prevalent, with those outside of Greek culture often seen as inferior and deserving of subjugation. This ethnocentric perspective reinforced the idea that slavery was a natural and acceptable institution, as it was believed that the enslaved were inherently less capable of contributing to society. Despite the pervasive acceptance of slavery, there were also voices of dissent within Greek society. Some individuals and groups questioned the morality of slavery and advocated for the humane treatment of enslaved people. Philosophers like Socrates, while not explicitly opposing slavery, emphasized the importance of virtue and moral character, suggesting that all individuals, regardless of their status, deserved respect and dignity. Additionally, there were instances of slaves who managed to gain their freedom, either through manumission or by purchasing their own freedom, highlighting the complexities of the institution and the potential for change. The role of slavery in Greek society also had profound implications for the development of social hierarchies and class structures. The wealth generated through slave labor contributed to the prosperity of the elite, creating a distinct divide between the privileged and the marginalized. This economic disparity reinforced social stratification, with free citizens enjoying privileges and rights that were denied to enslaved individuals. The reliance on slavery as a means of economic production perpetuated a cycle of inequality, as the labor of enslaved individuals was essential for the accumulation of wealth and power among the ruling class. In conclusion, the role and perception of slavery in Greek society were complex and multifaceted. Slavery was deeply integrated into daily life and the economy, providing essential labor that sustained households and industries. The treatment of slaves varied widely, but they were universally denied rights and autonomy, viewed as property rather than individuals. Philosophical justifications for slavery, particularly from figures like Aristotle, reinforced the institution's acceptance within Greek culture, framing it as a natural and beneficial arrangement. While there were voices of dissent advocating for the humane treatment of enslaved individuals, the prevailing attitudes and economic structures perpetuated the institution of slavery. Understanding the role of slavery in ancient Greece provides valuable insights into the social dynamics and ethical considerations of the time, highlighting the enduring complexities of human relationships and the moral implications of exploitation. Healthcare practices and beliefs in ancient Greece were shaped by a combination of empirical observations, cultural traditions, and religious beliefs. The understanding of health and illness during this period was markedly different from contemporary medical practices, characterized by a reliance on herbal remedies, the absence of formal hospitals, and a significant emphasis on divine intervention. These elements combined to create a unique healthcare system that reflected the values and limitations of ancient Greek society. In ancient Greece, the concept of healthcare was primarily rooted in the home and community rather than in formal medical institutions. The absence of hospitals, as we know them today, meant that individuals often relied on family members or local healers for medical care. These healers, known as iatroi, were typically not formally trained in a medical school, but gained their knowledge through experience and apprenticeship. They utilized a variety of herbal remedies and natural treatments to address ailments, drawing on the rich tradition of herbal medicine that was prevalent in the region. Plants such as willow, garlic, and various herbs were commonly used for their medicinal properties, and the knowledge of these remedies was often passed down through generations. The reliance on herbal remedies was a fundamental aspect of ancient Greek healthcare practices. Healers would prepare concoctions, poultices, and infusions from local plants to treat a range of conditions, from minor ailments like headaches and digestive issues to more serious illnesses. The use of herbal medicine was not only practical, but also deeply intertwined with the cultural beliefs of the time. Many Greeks believed that the natural world held the key to health and healing, and the use of plants was seen as a way to harness the power of nature for therapeutic purposes. However, the effectiveness of these remedies varied widely, and the lack of scientific understanding meant that treatments were often based on trial and error rather than empirical evidence. In addition to herbal remedies, the ancient Greeks also employed various physical treatments, such as massage and exercise, to promote health and well-being. Physical fitness was highly valued in Greek culture, and the belief in the importance of a balanced lifestyle contributed to the overall approach to healthcare. Athletes, for example, were often seen as exemplars of health, and their training regimens included not only physical exercise, but also attention to diet and rest. However, the limitations of medical knowledge meant that many treatments were rudimentary and lacked the sophistication of modern medical practices. Divine intervention played a significant role in the healthcare beliefs of ancient Greeks. The Greeks believed that health and illness were often influenced by the gods, and many sought divine assistance in times of sickness. Temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing, were scattered throughout Greece, serving as centers for health and wellness. Pilgrims would travel to these temples to seek cures for their ailments, often engaging in rituals that included offerings, prayers, and even incubation, sleeping in the temple in hopes of receiving a healing dream from the god. The belief in divine intervention underscored the idea that health was not solely a matter of physical well-being, but also a reflection of one's relationship with the divine. The role of Asclepius in Greek healthcare exemplified the intersection of religion and medicine. Asclepius was often depicted as a benevolent figure who could cure the sick and restore health. His temples, known as Asclepia, were places where individuals could seek both physical and spiritual healing. The rituals performed at these sites often included sacrifices, prayers, and the consultation of priests who acted as intermediaries between the patients and the divine. This reliance on divine intervention highlighted the limitations of human understanding and the belief that health was ultimately in the hands of the gods. Despite the rich tapestry of healthcare practices in ancient Greece, there were significant limitations to medical knowledge and practices. The understanding of anatomy and physiology was rudimentary, and many medical theories were based on philosophical ideas rather than empirical observation. For instance, the ancient Greeks believed in the theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, which was thought to govern health and temperament. An imbalance of these humors was believed to cause illness, leading to treatments aimed at restoring balance through diet, bloodletting, or other methods. While this theory laid the groundwork for later medical practices, it lacked the scientific rigor that characterizes modern medicine. The limitations of medical knowledge were further compounded by the lack of formal training for healers. While some individuals gained practical experience through apprenticeships, there were no standardized medical schools or rigorous training programs. This lack of formal education meant that the quality of care varied widely, with some healers possessing valuable knowledge, while others relied on superstition and ineffective treatments. The absence of a systematic approach to healthcare also meant that many conditions went untreated or were misdiagnosed, leading to unnecessary suffering. In addition to the limitations of medical knowledge, societal attitudes toward health and illness also influenced healthcare practices. Illness was often viewed as a punishment from the gods or a reflection of moral failings, leading to stigma and shame for those who were unwell. This belief could deter individuals from seeking help, as they may have feared judgment or ostracism from their communities. The intertwining of health with morality created a complex dynamic that affected how individuals approached their own well-being and the care of others. Despite these challenges, there were notable advancements in medical thought during the ancient Greek period. Figures such as Hippocrates, often referred to as the father of medicine, began to shift the focus from supernatural explanations of illness to more rational and observational approaches. Hippocrates emphasized the importance of careful observation, diagnosis, and the ethical practice of medicine. His teachings laid the foundation for a more systematic understanding of health and illness, moving away from purely religious explanations. The Hippocratic Corpus, a collection of medical texts attributed to Hippocrates and his followers, introduced concepts such as clinical observation and the importance of patient history, marking a significant step toward a more scientific approach to medicine. In conclusion, healthcare practices and beliefs in ancient Greece were characterized by a reliance on herbal remedies, the absence of formal hospitals, and a significant emphasis on divine intervention. The integration of herbal medicine into daily life reflected the Greeks' connection to the natural world, while the role of divine figures like Asclepius underscored the belief that health was influenced by the gods. However, the limitations of medical knowledge and practices, coupled with societal attitudes toward health and illness, created a complex landscape for healthcare in ancient Greece. While advancements in medical thought began to emerge, the understanding of health remained intertwined with cultural beliefs and religious practices. By examining these healthcare practices and beliefs, we gain valuable insights into the historical context of medicine and the enduring influence of ancient Greek thought on contemporary healthcare systems. The significance of theatre and philosophy in ancient Greek culture cannot be overstated, as both played pivotal roles in shaping societal values, identity, and civic life. Theatre served not only as a form of entertainment, but also as a civic duty, while philosophical discourse became a cornerstone of public life. Together, these cultural elements fostered a rich intellectual environment that influenced the development of Western thought and the collective identity of the Greek city-states. Theatre in ancient Greece was deeply intertwined with civic duty and community engagement. The origins of Greek theatre can be traced back to religious festivals, particularly those honoring Dionysus, the god of wine and fertility. These festivals included dramatic competitions where playwrights presented their works, often exploring themes of morality, human experience, and the relationship between individuals and the divine. The most famous of these festivals was the city Dionysia held in Athens, which attracted large audiences and featured the works of renowned playwrights such as Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. Attending theatre was considered a civic responsibility for male citizens, as it was believed to promote moral and ethical reflection. The plays often addressed pressing social issues, such as justice, power, and the human condition, prompting audiences to engage in critical thinking about their own lives and the society in which they lived. The communal experience of watching a play fostered a sense of unity among citizens, reinforcing shared values and collective identity. The theatre was a space where individuals could confront complex moral dilemmas and reflect on their roles within the community, making it an essential aspect of civic life. Moreover, the theatre served as a platform for political commentary and social critique. Many playwrights used their works to challenge the status quo, question authority, and provoke thought about contemporary issues. For instance, Aristophanes, a prominent comic playwright, often employed satire to address political corruption and societal norms, encouraging audiences to reflect on the implications of their actions and beliefs. This ability to engage with political and social themes through drama allowed theatre to function as a catalyst for dialogue and change, reinforcing its significance in public life. In addition to its role as a civic duty, theatre was also a vital form of entertainment. The elaborate productions, complete with intricate costumes, masks, and staging, captivated audiences and provided an escape from the rigors of daily life. The emotional range of the performances, from tragedy to comedy, allowed spectators to experience a wide array of feelings, fostering empathy and understanding. The cathartic experience of witnessing the struggles and triumphs of characters on stage enabled audiences to process their own emotions and experiences, further solidifying the theatre's importance in Greek culture. Philosophy, on the other hand, emerged as a critical component of public life in ancient Greece, shaping the intellectual landscape and influencing societal values. Philosophers such as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle engaged in rigorous discourse about ethics, politics, metaphysics, and the nature of knowledge. Their ideas challenged conventional wisdom and encouraged individuals to think critically about their beliefs and assumptions. The Socratic method, for example, emphasized questioning and dialogue as a means of arriving at truth, fostering an environment of intellectual curiosity and exploration. Public philosophical discourse often took place in the agora, the central marketplace of Athens, where citizens gathered to discuss ideas and engage in debates. This accessibility of philosophical thought allowed for a diverse range of voices and perspectives to be heard, contributing to a vibrant intellectual community. The emphasis on reasoned argument and critical thinking became foundational to Athenian democracy, as citizens were encouraged to participate in discussions about governance and civic responsibility. The interplay between theatre and philosophy in ancient Greece further enriched the cultural landscape. Both forms of expression sought to explore the complexities of human existence and the moral dilemmas faced by individuals. Philosophers often drew upon themes found in theatre to illustrate their ideas, while playwrights incorporated philosophical concepts into their works. This mutual influence allowed for a deeper understanding of the human experience, as both theatre and philosophy grappled with questions of ethics, justice, and the nature of reality. The cultural elements of theatre and philosophy significantly shaped societal values and identity in ancient Greece. The emphasis on civic duty in theatre reinforced the idea that individuals had a responsibility to engage with their community and contribute to the common good. This sense of civic engagement was essential for the functioning of the city-state, as it fostered a collective identity rooted in shared values and goals. The theatre became a space where citizens could come together to reflect on their roles within society, reinforcing the importance of participation in public life. Similarly, the philosophical discourse that permeated public life encouraged individuals to cultivate a sense of self-awareness and moral responsibility. The teachings of philosophers emphasized the importance of virtue, ethics, and the pursuit of knowledge, shaping the character of citizens and their interactions with one another. The idea that individuals should strive for excellence and contribute to the betterment of society became a guiding principle in Greek culture, influencing everything from politics to personal relationships. The legacy of theatre and philosophy in ancient Greece extends far beyond its historical context, as these cultural elements laid the groundwork for Western thought and artistic expression. The themes explored in Greek theatre continue to resonate in contemporary literature and drama, while the philosophical inquiries initiated by ancient thinkers remain foundational to modern philosophy and ethics. The emphasis on critical thinking, civic engagement, and the exploration of the human condition established by the Greeks continues to inform our understanding of society and the individual's role within it. In conclusion, the significance of theatre and philosophy in ancient Greek culture is profound, as both played essential roles in shaping societal values, identity, and civic life. Theatre served as a civic duty and a form of entertainment, fostering critical reflection and communal engagement among citizens. Philosophical discourse became a cornerstone of public life, encouraging individuals to think critically about their beliefs and responsibilities. Together, these cultural elements created a rich intellectual environment that influenced the development of Western thought and continues to resonate in contemporary society. The legacy of ancient Greek theatre and philosophy serves as a reminder of the enduring power of art and ideas to shape our understanding of the world and our place within it. Ancient Greece, often romanticized through its myths and legends, presents a rich tapestry of history that reveals the complexities of life beyond the stories of gods and heroes. While the tales of Zeus, Athena, and Hercules capture our imagination, the realities of daily life in ancient Greece were shaped by a myriad of social, political, and cultural factors that define the experiences of its citizens. From the intricate dynamics of democracy in Athens to the rigid societal structures of Sparta, the ancient Greek world was a place of both remarkable achievements and profound contradictions. One of the key points to consider is the role of democracy in Athens, which, while revolutionary in its emphasis on citizen participation, was also marked by significant limitations. Citizenship was restricted to free-born males of Athenian descent, excluding women, slaves, and foreigners from political processes. This paradox highlights the complexities of Athenian democracy, where the ideals of equality and participation coexisted with exclusionary practices. The vibrant public life of Athens, characterized by philosophical discourse and theatrical performances, served as a platform for civic engagement, yet it also reinforced social hierarchies that marginalized large segments of the population. The significance of theatre in ancient Greek culture cannot be overlooked. It was not merely a form of entertainment, but a civic duty that encouraged moral reflection and communal engagement. The plays performed during festivals often tackled pressing social issues, prompting audiences to confront their values and beliefs. This interplay between theatre and civic responsibility fostered a sense of identity among citizens, reinforcing the idea that participation in public life was essential for the health of the city-state. Philosophy, too, played a crucial role in shaping the intellectual landscape of ancient Greece. Thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle engaged in rigorous discourse about ethics, politics, and the nature of knowledge, encouraging individuals to think critically about their beliefs and responsibilities. The emphasis on reasoned argument and public debate became foundational to Athenian democracy, influencing the development of Western thought and the principles of governance that continue to resonate today. Moreover, the realities of daily life in ancient Greece were marked by the institution of slavery, which was deeply integrated into the economy and social structure. Slaves performed essential labor in households, agriculture, and various trades, yet they were denied basic rights and autonomy. The philosophical justifications for slavery, rooted in notions of superiority and natural order, reveal the moral complexities that underpinned Greek society. Understanding these dynamics allows us to appreciate the historical context of ancient Greece and its implications for contemporary discussions about equality and human rights. As we reflect on the historical context of ancient Greece, it is essential to recognize its relevance today. The ideals of democracy, civic engagement, and philosophical inquiry continue to shape our understanding of governance and ethics. The challenges faced by ancient Greeks in navigating social hierarchies and moral dilemmas resonate with modern struggles for justice and equality. By examining the complexities of life in ancient Greece, we gain valuable insights into the human experience and the enduring quest for meaning and understanding. In conclusion, the exploration of ancient Greece reveals a multifaceted society rich in cultural achievements and intellectual pursuits. The interplay between democracy, theatre, philosophy, and the realities of daily life underscores the complexities that define this remarkable civilization. As we delve deeper into the history of ancient Greece, we invite you to reflect on these themes and consider their relevance in our contemporary world. If you enjoyed this exploration of ancient Greece and want to learn more about its fascinating history, we encourage you to subscribe to our channel. By liking our videos and sharing your thoughts in the comments, you can help us create a vibrant community of history enthusiasts. Explore more content on our channel, where we delve into various aspects of ancient civilizations, their cultures, and their legacies. Join us on this journey through time as we uncover the stories that have shaped our world today.